The impact shook the earth, sending a tremor through the quiet coastal town of Bayridge. In the dense forest outside town limits, a gleaming pod hissed open, releasing steam into the night air. Alara stumbled out, her silver-blue eyes scanning the unfamiliar landscape. The royal insignia on her shoulder still glowed faintly, the last remnant of the life she'd fled. Coordinates accurate, uninhabited area, low technological advancement. Her translator device chirped against her wrist. Sovereignty tracking disabled. Alara pulled off the device and crushed it beneath her boot. Not disabled, destroyed. Her accent was strange, melodic, her words carefully formed as if each one was a new discovery. She had planned her escape for years, studying Earth's languages, customs, and weaknesses in the sovereignty's patrol patterns. What she hadn't planned was the crash landing or the damage to her supplies. All she had now were the clothes on her back and a small pouch of items that would seem worthless to humans but could sustain her until she figured out her next move. Mason Calloway yawned as he guided his truck down the winding coastal road. The late shift at the lighthouse had run long, and all he wanted was to relieve Mrs. Winters, who was watching his 8-year-old daughter, Penny. Single parenthood wasn't how he'd imagined his 30s, but after his wife's death 3 years ago, he'd learned to rebuild his life one day at a time. The headlights swept across a figure by the roadside, a woman in strange, tattered clothing, her hair an unusual platinum shade that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. Mason pulled over. "Hey there, are you okay?" Alara tensed, ready to flee, but exhaustion kept her rooted in place. "I lost my way." "You're not from around here," Mason said, noticing her unusual accent. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" "I have nowhere to go," she admitted, the truth slipping out before she could think better of it. Mason studied her. He'd always been a good judge of character, had to be with Penny to protect. This woman seemed lost in more ways than one, but there was a dignity about her, a certain grace despite her disheveled appearance. "Look, I run the lighthouse just up the coast. There's a small guest house on the property. You can stay there tonight, get cleaned up, and figure things out in the morning." Alara's training as crown princess of the celestial sovereignty warned against trusting strangers, but her instincts, the ones she'd been forbidden from following her entire life, told her this human posed no threat. "That is very kind, thank you." The guest house was simple, one room with a small bathroom attached, but to Alara it was freedom. She watched from the window as Mason walked to the main house, where a small girl with wild curls greeted him at the door with an enthusiastic hug. "Who's the lady, Dad?" Penny asked, peering around Mason toward the guest house. "Someone who needed help," Mason explained. "She'll stay in the guest house tonight." "Does she like pancakes? We should bring her pancakes tomorrow." Mason smiled. "We'll ask her in the morning." In the guest house, Alara removed the royal garments hidden beneath her outer clothes. The fabric, woven with communication circuits and tracking technology, would need to be destroyed. She was no longer Princess Alara of House Valesha, heir to the sovereign throne and unwilling bride-to-be to a man she'd never met. Here, she could be just Alara. As she washed away the dirt from her journey in the simple earth shower, she allowed herself to feel the weight of her decision. She had abandoned her people, her responsibilities, but they had never truly been hers to begin with. She had been a symbol, a political tool, never a person with desires of her own. Morning would bring new challenges, but tonight, for the first time in her 28 years, she would sleep without guards at her door or the burden of an empire on her shoulders. 2 weeks had passed since Alara's arrival, and Bayridge was beginning to feel like home. Mason had offered to let her stay in the guest house until she got back on her feet, an Earth expression she found both puzzling and endearing. In return, she helped with lighthouse maintenance and spent time with Penny while Mason worked. Today, they walked along the shoreline, Penny darting ahead to collect shells while Alara marveled at the simple wonder of ocean waves. On her home world, Celestia, the seas were carefully regulated, their tides controlled by atmospheric generators, their surfaces smooth as glass. Nothing like this wild, untamed beauty. "Alara, look what I found." Penny raced back, cupping something in her small hands. She opened them to reveal a perfect spiral shell, iridescent in the morning light. "It's beautiful," Alara said, genuinely awed by the natural geometry. "It's for you," Penny declared. "Dad says when you find something special, you should share it with someone special." Emotion caught in Alara's throat. On Celestia, gifts were political calculations, offerings meant to curry favor or demonstrate power, never simple expressions of affection. "Thank you, Penny, I will treasure it." She slipped the shell into her pocket, next to the royal insignia she still couldn't bring herself to discard. Later that afternoon, as Alara helped Mason prepare dinner, their hands brushed. The simple contact sent warmth flooding through her, a sensation both alarming and exhilarating. "Sorry," Mason said, though he didn't pull away immediately. "No need for apologies," she replied, looking up to meet his gaze. For a moment they stood suspended in possibility, the kitchen quiet except for the distant sound of Penny playing in the living room. Then Mason leaned forward just slightly, and Alara met him halfway. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and over far too quickly when Penny called from the other room. Mason pulled back, a mixture of surprise and happiness on his face. "I've wanted to do that for days." "As have I," Alara admitted, "though I'm not particularly experienced in this area." Mason laughed softly. "You talk like you're from another planet sometimes." If only he knew. That night after Penny was asleep, they sat on the porch of the main house, looking up at the stars. Mason pointed out constellations, unaware that Alara could name not only the stars visible to human eyes, but also the civilizations that orbited many of them. "What were you running from?" Mason asked suddenly. "When I found you that night." Alara considered lying, but found she couldn't not to him. "An arranged marriage, a life planned for me without my consent." Mason nodded, understanding in his eyes. "My marriage to Penny's mom wasn't arranged, but our life together was complicated. She wasn't ready for the responsibility of a child. She left when Penny was 2. "Yet you stayed," Alara observed. "I couldn't imagine any other choice," he said simply. Alara reached for his hand, marveling at how natural it felt to touch him. On Celestia, royal persons were rarely touched except in formal ceremonies. Physical contact was considered a vulnerability, a breach of protocol. Now she craved it, the warmth of his skin, the strength in his fingers as they intertwined with hers. "May I kiss you again?" she asked. Mason's smile was answer enough, and this time, with no interruptions, the kiss deepened. His hand cradled her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with a tenderness that made her ache. When they finally parted, breathless, Alara felt as though something fundamental had shifted in her universe. But the universe had a way of reestablishing its order. 3 days later, at midnight, Alara's insignia began to pulse with light. She'd been half asleep in the guest house when the glow woke her, illuminating the room with an eerie blue radiance. The pulse pattern was unmistakable. A locator beacon had been activated. They'd found her. Across town, in the small observatory where amateur astronomers gathered on clear nights, Professor Jenkins stared in confusion at his telescope readings. The star patterns had shifted, as if something massive had entered Earth's atmosphere without triggering any of the usual detection systems. At the same moment, every electronic device in Berridge flickered. Televisions switched to static. Car alarms blared and silenced themselves. The lighthouse beam swept in an irregular pattern before resuming its steady rhythm. Mason noticed it from the main house, frowning as he checked on Penny, who slept undisturbed. His gaze drifted to the guest house where Alara stayed. In the brief power fluctuation, he could have sworn he saw an intense blue light shining from beneath her door. Inside the guest house, Alara clutched the Poolsing insignia, terror and resignation warring within her. Commander Draylock would be leading the retrieval team. He always handled matters concerning the royal family. He was ruthlessly efficient and utterly loyal to the sovereignty's protocols. She looked out the window at Mason's house, thinking of him sleeping peacefully with Penny under his protection. For the first time in her life, Alara had experienced what it meant to be part of a family, to be valued for herself rather than her title. The thought of leaving tore at her heart, but the thought of bringing danger to their doorstep was unbearable. She would have to go before the sovereignty arrived, before Mason and Penny became collateral damage in a galactic power struggle they knew nothing about. But as she packed the few belongings she'd accumulated, Alara realized she was no longer the same woman who had fled her responsibilities weeks ago. That woman had been running away from something. Now she had something, someone to run toward. And perhaps, just perhaps, that made all the difference. The morning broke with unnatural stillness over Berridge. No birds sang, no wind stirred the trees, as if Earth itself held its breath in anticipation. Alara stood at the lighthouse's highest point, watching the horizon where the ordinary blue sky had taken on a faint purple tinge, invisible to human eyes but unmistakable to hers. The sovereignty was here. She'd left a note for Mason, explaining that she had to leave, that danger followed her. What she hadn't explained was her true identity or the nature of that danger. How could she? Even if he believed her, it would only put him and Penny at greater risk. You weren't going to say goodbye. Mason's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway to the observation deck, hurt and confusion in his eyes. I thought it would be easier, she admitted. Easier for who? He stepped closer. Alara, whatever you're running from, whoever you're running from, you don't have to face it alone. The sincerity in his voice nearly broke her. Mason, there are things about me you don't know, things that would change how you see me. Try me. His hand found hers, warm and steady. Before she could respond, a low hum filled the air. The sound grew, vibrating through the lighthouse until the windows rattled in their frames. Outside, a massive shadow fell across the bay as a ship, elegant and terrible in its design, descended through the clouds. Mason stared, disbelief warring with the evidence before his eyes. What the hell is that? That, Alara said, her royal accent returning in full force, is the Celestial Sovereignty's flagship, Eternal Dawn, and they've come for me. In the tense minutes that followed, Alara told him everything. About Celestia, her royal lineage, the arranged marriage meant to end a century-long conflict between star systems. Mason listened without interruption, his expression shifting from shock to understanding. Why didn't you tell me? He asked finally. Because I wanted to be just Alara to you. Not a princess, not a political asset, just a woman who... Who what? Who fell in love with a lighthouse keeper and his daughter, she finished softly. Mason's eyes widened, but before he could respond, the lighthouse door burst open. Penny raced up the stairs, panic in her voice. Dad, there are weird people in the yard. They have glowy sticks and... She stopped short at the sight of Alara, sensing something had changed. It's okay, sweetheart, Mason said, though his voice betrayed his uncertainty. Stay behind me. The air shimmered at the top of the stairs, and a tall figure materialized, Commander Draylock in full ceremonial armor, flanked by 2 royal guards. His cold eyes fixed on Alara. Princess Valesha, he announced, using her formal title. By order of the Sovereign Council, you are to return immediately to fulfill your duties. The Arcadian delegation awaits your arrival for the union ceremony. Alara straightened, royal training taking over despite herself. Commander Draylock, I formally renounce my claim to the throne and all associated responsibilities. Draylock's expression didn't change. Your personal preferences are irrelevant, Your Highness. The alliance depends on your marriage. Millions of lives hang in the balance. There are other ways to secure peace, Alara countered. Ways that don't require treating people as property. Nevertheless, you will return. Draylock raised his hand and the guards stepped forward. Mason moved in front of Alara. She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go. The commander regarded Mason with clinical detachment. This human is inconsequential. He will be memory wiped along with the child and any other witnesses. No, Alara pushed past Mason, royal authority ringing in her voice. By sovereign law, I claim sanctuary under Section 12 of the Non-Interference Protocols. I have formed a familial bond with these humans, making them protected persons. Draylock hesitated, clearly unprepared for her knowledge of the law. Such claims require verification by the Council. Then I demand a council hearing, Alara pressed. Here now with full telepathic verification. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the commander's face. What Alara proposed was unprecedented, but technically within her rights as a royal. Very well, he said finally. The council will convene remotely. What followed was a surreal hour as holographic projections of 12 ancient Celestians appeared in the lighthouse. They questioned Alara about her feelings for Mason and Penny, probed her memories of their time together, and debated in their ancient language while Mason stood protectively beside her, refusing to be intimidated. Finally, the eldest council member spoke. Princess Valesha has indeed formed genuine bonds of affection with these Earth beings, bonds that, under our oldest laws, are protected. However, the political situation remains precarious. May I offer a solution? Alara stepped forward. My cousin Thalia has always been more suited to politics than I. She understands the Arcadian culture and would make a more effective diplomat. With proper council backing, she could negotiate a trade alliance rather than a marriage pact. The council members looked at each other, communicating silently. This has merit, the elder admitted reluctantly. Princess Thalia has shown aptitude in diplomatic affairs. Then I formally abdicate in her favor, Alara declared, and request citizenship status on Earth under the Protected Observation Clause. I will maintain communication silence regarding our civilization and technologies. More silent communication passed among the council before the elder nodded. We will require annual verification, but your terms are accepted, Princess. Or should I say, Citizen Vaylesha. Relief washed over Alara as the holograms faded one by one. Commander Draylock looked distinctly displeased but bowed stiffly. It will be as the council has decreed. Farewell, citizen. When they were gone, when the ship had vanished into the sky and the world seemed normal again, Mason, Alara, and Penny stood together on the lighthouse balcony. So, Mason said, still processing everything, you're an alien princess who just gave up a throne to stay here, with us. I gave up a gilded cage, Alara corrected him, to stay with the people who showed me what love actually means. She knelt down to Penny's level. If that's okay with both of you. Penny considered this with the seriousness only an 8-year-old could muster. Can you still help me with my science project? I want to build a model of the solar system, and I bet you know all the planets. Alara laughed, tears of joy threatening to spill. I know quite a few planets, yes. Mason pulled her to her feet and into his arms. I don't care where you're from, I just care that you're here. His kiss was a promise, an anchor in a universe suddenly much larger than he'd ever imagined. That night after Penny was asleep, Alara and Mason stood on the beach under the vast canopy of stars. His arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, they looked up at the distant worlds she had left behind. Do you regret it? Mason asked softly. Giving up, well, everything. Alara shook her head. I gave up nothing that mattered and gained everything that does. She turned in his arms to face him, the starlight reflecting in her silver-blue eyes. On Celestia, we have a saying, the universe bends toward what is meant to be. I think I was always meant to find my way here. To you. Mason's fingers traced the curve of her cheek, still amazed by the miracle of her. Well, I'm glad the universe is on our side. Their kiss beneath the stars sealed a promise no royal decree or galactic council could break. A love that defied distance, difference, and destiny itself. And in the lighthouse by the sea, they began to build something neither of them had truly had before. A home.